Have you ever felt like your dreams were just too far away, almost impossible to reach? Imagine a little boy growing up in poverty, rejected time after time, knocked down by failures. Yet one day he rises to the world stage, becoming a symbol of hope for millions. This is the story of Jamal Roberts, a journey from zero to hero, from shadows of despair to the light of inspiration. And believe me, after hearing his story, you'll realize that no dream is ever too big, as long as you dare to take the first step. Jamal's childhood, a beginning full of hardship. When we look at the story of Jamal Roberts today, a man admired by thousands for his strength, determination, and eventual success, it's almost impossible to imagine just how difficult his beginnings truly were. Jamal was born into a world where opportunity felt like a luxury reserved for other people. His family lived in one of the city's most overlooked neighborhoods, the kind of place where cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and the constant sound of sirens became the backdrop of daily life. His childhood home was small and fragile, barely holding together with its chipped paint, leaking roof, and creaking floors. In the rainy season, water would pour through the ceiling, forcing his family to place buckets all around the living room to catch the drips. It wasn't much, but for Jamal, it was still home, a place where love had to exist in abundance to make up for the absence of material comfort. His father was a hardworking man who never had a steady job. One week he was laying bricks at a construction site, the next he was hauling heavy crates in a warehouse. Whatever work he could find, he took, no matter how tough or underpaid. His mother, meanwhile, ran a tiny stall just outside their front door, selling snacks and homemade drinks to neighbors in hopes of bringing in a little extra income. But despite their efforts, the family lived paycheck to paycheck, and often not even that. There were many mornings when Jamal had to go to school with an empty stomach, too embarrassed to admit to his classmates that there simply wasn't enough food at home. The environment around him only made things harder. Many of Jamal's friends growing up were pulled into gangs, drugs, or petty crime before they even reached high school. In his neighborhood, it wasn't strange for children to stop attending school altogether, lured by the false promise of fast money from dangerous activities. For Jamal, resisting those temptations was not easy. He was often laughed at and taunted, "Why study? You'll end up stuck here anyway." But deep down, Jamal refused to believe that this was all life had to offer. Even though his school supplies consisted of torn-up notebooks and pencils worn down to stubs, he treated every page, every lesson, as if it was a stepping stone to something greater. He has often shared one story that stuck with him for life. When he was only 9 years old, his teacher asked each student to stand up and declare what they wanted to become in the future. One by one, his classmates answered confidently, doctor, lawyer, police officer, pilot. When it was Jamal's turn, he stood nervously but firmly and said, "I want to be someone the world knows, not because of money, but because I inspire others never to give up." The classroom erupted in laughter, and even the teacher offered a doubtful smile, thinking it was nothing more than childish imagination. But Jamal, even at that young age, held on to those words as a personal vow. He didn't know how he would achieve it, but he knew he wanted to. The truth is, hardship was Jamal's greatest teacher. He never had new clothes. His shoes often had holes, and his shirts were hand-me-downs from cousins. His family couldn't afford electricity bills on time, so there were weeks when the lights stayed out, and Jamal had to do his homework by candlelight. But instead of letting those struggles break him, he used them as fuel. Every insult, every moment of being overlooked, every hungry night became another reason to fight harder. In a world where so many gave up early, Jamal made a silent promise to himself, "I will not quit. I will rise." This first chapter of Jamal's life might seem like pure hardship, but in reality, it was the foundation that built his resilience. Without these struggles, without the poverty and the ridicule, there would be no story of triumph to tell. From a fragile little house in a forgotten corner of the city, a boy with nothing but grit in his heart and dreams in his mind was slowly shaping into the man who would one day go from zero to hero. The spark of passion, discovering his talent. Every hero's journey begins with a spark, an unexpected moment when the impossible suddenly feels possible. For Jamal Roberts, that spark appeared when he was just a teenager, navigating his way through the chaos of his environment. While many kids in his neighborhood sought escape through reckless choices, Jamal found his refuge in something far more powerful, his natural gift for performance. It didn't matter if it was on a makeshift stage at school, a community gathering in the park, or simply in front of his family at home, Jamal had a way of commanding attention. He wasn't the loudest or the strongest, but when he spoke, rapped, or acted out scenes, there was an undeniable energy that pulled people in. It was as if his struggles, his hunger, and his pain all found release in those moments of expression, transforming into something extraordinary. The first time Jamal realized his potential, he was only 13. His school was hosting a small talent show, and although he had no fancy clothes or backing track, he decided to participate. While other kids had costumes or practiced dance routines, Jamal walked onto the stage with nothing but his voice and a burning determination. He recited a poem he had written about life in his neighborhood, about poverty, broken dreams, and the hope that still lingered in the cracks of despair. His voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger with each word, echoing through the small auditorium like thunder. By the time he finished, the entire room was silent. And then, to his surprise, they erupted in applause. For Jamal, that moment was like a spark lighting up the darkness. For the first time, he felt seen not for what he lacked, but for what he could give. From then on, Jamal poured his heart into developing his talent. When he wasn't helping his mother at the stall or studying by candlelight, he was writing lyrics, practicing delivery, or studying the performances of artists who inspired him. Without money for instruments or proper equipment, Jamal improvised. He banged out rhythms on old pots and pans, turned his bedroom walls into imaginary audiences, and used his friends as critics who weren't afraid to tell him the truth. What fueled him most was not just the applause, but the sense of purpose he felt whenever he performed. For a boy who often felt invisible, this was his way of proving he existed, and that his existence mattered. Of course, not everyone supported his dream. His father worried that chasing fame was a waste of time when there were bills to pay. His mother, though loving, urged him to consider safer, more practical paths. Even his friends sometimes laughed at him for daring to believe he could break out of the cycle that trapped nearly everyone they knew. But Jamal had already tasted the intoxicating mix of passion and recognition, and there was no turning back. He wasn't chasing fortune or even fame, he was chasing freedom. He wanted to show that someone from the very bottom, someone with nothing, could climb his way up through talent, discipline, and pure resilience. Jamal once said in an interview, "Talent doesn't choose where you're born. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor. The question is, will you fight for it?" That was the mindset he carried as a teenager, even when resources were scarce. He fought for every chance to perform, entering local contests, volunteering at community events, and sometimes even sneaking into shows just to watch how professionals moved on stage. Each time he saw someone succeed, he told himself, "If they can, why not me?" This period of his life was not marked by fame or fortune, but by raw discovery, the realization that within him burned something no hardship could extinguish. It was the beginning of Jamal's transformation from a boy weighed down by circumstance to a young man with a vision. That spark of passion would soon become a fire, one that would guide him through the challenges still waiting ahead. Early struggles in chasing his dream. Dreams are often painted in bright colors, but the path toward them is almost always stained with sweat, sacrifice, and setbacks. For Jamal Roberts, the first steps toward chasing his dream were anything but easy. After discovering his passion for performance and realizing his voice had power, he wanted to turn that spark into a career. But wanting something and achieving it are two very different things, and Jamal soon found himself battling obstacles that tested not only his talent but also his spirit. One of his earliest struggles was money, or rather, the lack of it. Pursuing a dream in entertainment required resources Jamal simply didn't have. He couldn't afford studio time, expensive instruments, or professional coaching. While other aspiring artists had the privilege of financial backing, Jamal had to hustle. He took odd jobs, sweeping floors at a local diner, helping load boxes at a warehouse, even shining shoes on weekends, just to scrape together enough cash to buy secondhand microphones or a basic recorder. Sometimes, when the money ran out, he'd borrow equipment from friends or use free recording apps on old, nearly broken phones. Every penny he earned was stretched to fuel his dream, even if it meant skipping meals or going without new clothes. Beyond money, Jamal faced rejection, an unavoidable reality in the world of dreamers. He auditioned for local talent shows, small community events, and even open mic nights at neighborhood clubs. Most of the time, he was turned away before he even got a chance to perform. On the rare occasions he did get on stage, he was often dismissed as just another kid with big dreams. Some laughed at his rough clothes or the way his shoes were worn out. Others told him flatly that he didn't have the look or the connections to make it. Each rejection stung like a dagger, but instead of killing his resolve, it made him hungrier. Jamal would go home, write down every criticism, and use it as fuel to improve. Family pressure added another layer of difficulty. His father's warnings grew louder. "Stop wasting your time chasing fairy tales. Get a real job." His mother's tone, though softer, carried the same message: security over risk. Even friends facing the dark side of fame. For every spotlight that shines, there is always a shadow, and Jamal Roberts learned that the hard way. At first, fame had felt like a dream come true. The screaming fans, the magazine articles, the sold-out shows. But as his name grew louder, so did the noise around him, and not all of it was praise. Suddenly, Jamal found himself at the center of a world he had never been prepared for: the dark side of fame. It started with whispers, critics questioning whether his success was deserved, or if he was just another overnight sensation who would fade as quickly as he appeared. Some accused him of being too raw, while others dismissed his lyrics as just another street story. Jamal, who had poured every piece of himself into his music, was shocked at how easily strangers could tear it down with a few careless words. At first, he tried to brush it off, telling himself that criticism was part of the journey. But late at night, scrolling through comment sections and online forums, he couldn't help but feel the sting. The same internet that had lifted him up now became a weapon used to cut him down. Then came the pressure of constant expectations. Fans who once begged for new music now demanded it, flooding his inbox with, "When's the next song?" or "You've changed since you got famous." Promoters pushed him for bigger shows, labels wanted faster hits, and his small team struggled to keep up with the sudden pace. Jamal, who had once been grateful for any attention at all, now felt suffocated by it. Sleep deprived and exhausted, he began to question whether he was still making music for himself or just trying to feed the machine. The darker moments came off stage. Fame had made Jamal more visible, and with visibility came temptation. Parties, late nights, people who claimed to be friends but only wanted access to his rising star. Alcohol flowed easily, and so did other substances. Some nights blurred together, the line between celebration and self-destruction dangerously thin. For a young man who had already grown up surrounded by hardship, these new vices threatened to drag him back into the very struggles he thought he had escaped. And then there was loneliness, the part of fame no one warns you about. Surrounded by crowds, yet feeling more isolated than ever. Old friends treated him differently, either jealous of his success or desperate to be a part of it. Even within his own family, money and recognition began to create cracks. Arguments broke out over trust, loyalty, and whether he was changing too much. Jamal, once the boy who longed to be seen, now sometimes wished he could just disappear again. The media didn't help. Every mistake, every misstep was magnified. If he showed up late to a performance, rumors spread that he was unreliable. If he was spotted at a party, headlines screamed, "Troublemaker." Paparazzi followed him down streets he used to walk unnoticed, shoving cameras in his face, hungry for any slip-up that could be turned into a scandal. Jamal realized quickly that fame wasn't just about making music anymore, it was about survival. But perhaps the hardest part was internal. Jamal struggled with the identity shift. Was he still the kid from the neighborhood who scribbled rhymes on scrap paper, or had he become a product shaped by managers, contracts, and public demand? The authenticity that had made people fall in love with his music now felt under threat, and Jamal feared losing himself in the whirlwind of fame. And yet, even in the chaos, there was resilience. Jamal refused to let the darkness swallow him whole. He started cutting ties with toxic influences, stepping back from the endless parties and focusing on his craft. He began speaking openly about the struggles that fame brought, turning his pain into lyrics that resonated even deeper with fans. By admitting he wasn't perfect, he became more relatable than ever. This stage of his journey taught Jamal a vital lesson. Success is not just about climbing, it's about holding on once you're at the top. Fame, with all its glitter and glamour, came with a price. But Jamal, scarred yet stronger, was determined not to let it destroy him. For every critic, there was still a fan who believed. For every shadow, there was still light. And for Jamal Roberts, the fight was far from over. Jamal's biggest career milestone. Every artist dreams of the moment that defines their career. The moment when all the struggles, sacrifices, and sleepless nights finally crystallize into something unforgettable. And for Jamal Roberts, that milestone arrived in a way that even he could hardly believe. After years of hustling in small clubs, pouring his heart into mixtapes that barely paid the bills, and fighting through criticism that questioned whether he even belonged, Jamal found himself standing center stage at Madison Square Garden, one of the most iconic venues in the world, with tens of thousands of fans screaming his name. It was more than just a concert. It was a statement, proof that a boy who once had nothing could rise to a place reserved for legends. The build-up to that night had been electric. His single, a raw and emotional anthem drawn straight from the pain of his past, had gone viral months earlier, climbing charts globally, earning radio play, and even catching the attention of industry heavyweights who had once overlooked him. Suddenly, Jamal was no longer just a promising underground name, he was a force shaking the very foundation of mainstream music. Awards soon followed, nominations at the Grammys, standing ovations at the BET Awards, and magazine covers that hailed him as the voice of a generation. But the milestone wasn't just about accolades or statistics, it was about impact. For the first time, Jamal felt the magnitude of what his story meant to others. Fans who lined up for hours just to tell him how his music had given them hope, how his lyrics about pain, survival, and perseverance had helped them through their darkest days. One fan even told him, with tears in her eyes, that a single verse of his had stopped her from giving up on life entirely. Moments like that reminded Jamal that music was more than beats and rhymes. It was connection, healing, and legacy. The pinnacle came when his breakout album went platinum, cementing his place in the industry. Holding that plaque in his hands, Jamal thought of his childhood bedroom, where he had once scribbled rhymes on scraps of paper by candlelight because the electricity had been shut off. He thought of his mother, working double shifts just to keep food on the table, and of the nights he had gone to bed hungry, promising himself that someday, somehow, he would turn his pain into power. And now, standing in front of the world, he had done exactly that. The media hailed it as his arrival, but for Jamal, it was more personal. It was a vindication, a way of proving not only to the doubters but to himself that he had been right to dream. Yet even in this triumph, Jamal remained humble, using interviews not to boast about his success but to thank his fans, his family, and even the struggles that had forged him. In one particularly moving moment during that Madison Square Garden concert, he stopped mid-performance, let the crowd's chants wash over him, and simply whispered into the microphone, "We made it." It wasn't just his victory, it belonged to everyone who had ever believed, everyone who had ever faced hardship but kept moving forward. That night, Jamal didn't just perform. He became a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the idea that no matter how broken your beginning, your story can still be rewritten into something extraordinary. Giving back, using his platform for good. As Jamal Roberts' star power continued to rise, he came to a powerful realization. Fame meant little if it wasn't used for something greater than himself, and so, rather than basking solely in the spotlight, he began to transform his success into a platform for giving back. For Jamal, it was never about luxury cars, designer jewelry, or the trappings of celebrity life. Instead, he carried with him the vivid memory of growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and hope even scarcer. He remembered the cracked basketball courts where kids with incredible talent never got the chance to go further, the schools without enough books, and the countless friends who slipped through society's cracks, falling into the same cycles of poverty and crime he had narrowly escaped. With that in mind, Jamal launched the From Nothing Foundation, a charity dedicated to providing scholarships, mentorship programs, and after-school activities for underprivileged youth. He didn't just put his name on it for publicity, he was there, in person, visiting classrooms, speaking to kids who reminded him of himself, and showing them that success wasn't just something they saw on TV but something they could build for themselves. Beyond education, Jamal also became a vocal advocate in the fight against drug abuse, a cause deeply personal to him given how addiction had devastated friends and even nearly derailed his own journey. He partnered with rehabilitation centers, funding treatment for those who couldn't afford it, and used his music to open conversations about mental health and the dangers of substance dependency, topics often swept under the rug in his community. One of his most impactful moments came during a televised award acceptance speech, where instead of talking about his wins, he spoke directly to struggling kids watching at home, urging them to hold on one more day, because tomorrow could be the start of something different. That line spread across social media like wildfire, shared millions of times, and etched itself into the hearts of his fans. Jamal also poured resources into rebuilding his hometown, renovating recreation centers, funding local art programs, and even opening a recording studio that offered free studio time for young artists who couldn't otherwise afford it. "If I can give them the tools I didn't have, maybe they won't have to go through what I went through," he told a journalist in an emotional interview. His philanthropy wasn't about headlines, it was about legacy. While the world saw him as a chart-topping artist, in the neighborhoods he touched, he was something more. A mentor, a lifeline, a symbol that rising above was possible. Fans admired that despite the fame, Jamal stayed deeply rooted in the struggles of everyday people, never forgetting where he came from. His acts of generosity weren't just about money, they were about time, presence, and genuine care. In giving back, Jamal found a deeper fulfillment than any award or sold-out show could provide. proving that his true legacy wasn't just in music but in the lives he touched and the hope he restored in places where it had nearly disappeared. Overcoming personal loss and hardship. Behind Jamal Roberts' confidence